What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Still Curtain podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of StillCurtain.com, and joining me, as always, is Still Curtain contributor, copy editor, Shayne Kubas. We've got no actual football to talk about today, but we've got a really fun what-if scenario that we're going to outline. Actually, a bunch of them. We're going to do a bunch of what-if scenarios. And if you're not so into the hypotheticals, we'll try to make it interesting for you anyway, because some of these are fun to think about. What would have happened had the Steelers done just a few things differently, and what would have happened, just a couple fun scenarios in there that not necessarily would have changed history. Before we dive into that today, though, Shayne, let's talk about Brendan Sorsby and just the weird fallout from this whole situation. So again, if you're just catching up on the Brendan Sorsby news, Brendan Sorsby's college quarterback, good football player, had a chance to come out this year, got in trouble for legal reasons, placed over 9,000 bets, over $90,000, some big gambling stuff, was reinstated to the NCAA. And then there was a ton of backlash, and teams sounded like they were going to refuse to play against Texas Tech, who he just transferred to this year. Ended up dropping out of that and applying for the supplemental draft. Well, he was denied entry to the NFL supplemental draft. The NFL sent him a letter making a very clear and firm stance that this type of behavior will not be tolerated. The integrity of the game will not be tolerated. Shayne, we could go down a number of rabbit holes here. And I know that, again, consistency in the NFL, it's like there's a lot of bad things that people do that aren't punished this severely. And I know that you mentioned that in one of our chats. And again, we can get into a big debate here. But the fact of the matter is Brendan Sorsby will not enter the supplemental draft. It sounds like the soonest he can come into the NFL would be next year's draft, and that's if he meets the requirements, right?
To me, this again, it sounds like he essentially will be required to sit out from football for a year unless he wants to go play in, the CFL or the UFL, which won't be back in action until after, the draft next year anyway. Again, like this situation has been one of the biggest storylines in football and in sports for the past few months. And the fact that it all ended up this way is fascinating to me, but also just kind of tells you what the league and what the NCAA is trying to accomplish here, which is essentially saying, like, if you do something like this, you're not going to have the chance to play football when you want to. Everything is going to be dictated by us. Like, we're not going to let you play college football, and then, the judges let you play football, but we still aren't really going to, we're going to find a way to make sure that you aren't playing football in college. And then he's like, well, the NFL, teams want me. Like, I could have been in this year's draft if I wanted to. I just wanted to play in college football another year. Well, whether teams want you or not, the NFL now is saying, sorry, buddy, we're not going to let you in, which, as you said, do I think that if he did almost anything else short of, things that would put him legitimately in prison and not able to play football anyway, do I think he would have been allowed entry? Absolutely, I do. And you could talk about whether that's good or bad, but that's just the case. I think if he does anything else, he's probably allowed to do it. And the integrity of the game aspect of it, I understand, but he isn't an NFL player. He's not subject to the CBA. Like, essentially punishing him before he enters the NFL for something he did in college that he is apparently, even though there's an aspect of this of, like, is he taking accountability? It sounds like the answer is no, whatever. He hasn't done anything against NFL rules technically, right? Because he isn't in the NFL. Denying him entry into the NFL through this means is a step that I think that they probably didn't have to do. And now that they've done it, it is a slippery slope, because the next time someone wants to enter the supplemental draft and they did something objectively worse as a human, which is probably going to be the case, everyone's going to be like, why are you letting this guy in? Why are you having a draft for this player then? It's just a situation where I wonder if the NFL, even if they're well within their right to do this, is it going to end up at just not really being a good look for anyone at the end of the day?
Yeah, Shayne, and not to make this into a whole thing, but the NFL had made it clear that they care more about integrity instead of ethics, dare I say, because
correct, which you could argue what's the difference in some cases, but yes, I agree.
Yeah. And again, what he did deserve to be punished. Like, it was against 100%. NCAA rules. You cannot place bets. I mean, he was a backup
Yes.
placing bets on his own team. You can't do that. They don't want the integrity of the game questioned. At the same time, it's almost like comical in a bad way. That's like, oh, we're going to wag the finger at you and then cut to a DraftKings commercial. I'm like, this is the NFL.
And the thing is, people have been talking about this for really since this started, and especially since he was now denied, about how like, oh, how is the NFL going to sit there and like not let him join the NFL when he's, he has a gambling addiction and apparently he's trying to get it solved and taken care of, and they are in bed with all these betting companies, right? And I understand where that thought process comes from, and I even myself, like, I tend to fall in the category of like, I'm not condoning what the player did. I'm just asking the question, are we really surprised that it happened? Like, are we surprised that these guys are doing this when it's been the NFL's and every other major sports league's like prerogative to get people to bet on their games? Are we that surprised when somebody does it, even if they're a player? And again, that does not absolve the player of their role in it. It's just, I do think we're there's a reason this is happening beyond just the player did it. They're being kind of influenced to do this, even if they know they shouldn't because they're a player. Like, that's the part of it that I think people have trouble with, and I understand that.
Yeah, and Sorsby obviously had at least a distant Steelers connection. We can connect the dots a little bit and say the Steelers need a franchise quarterback. Yes, they drafted Drew Aller with the number 76 overall pick this year. Is he really the guy? Sorsby, I think a lot of people would argue, is the more gifted overall player, just better, a better quarterback prospect. If you take away the off the field stuff here for a second. And so maybe they'll have a chance, and maybe this will be a guy that they'll scout thoroughly and look at next year if he's gets instated and is ready to enter the 2027 NFL draft. But we'll table the Sorsby talk for now because we've hit it so hard over the last several weeks.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some record-setting contracts that just came out in recent days here. And we'll start with Jeffrey Simmons, really talented defensive tackle, turns 29 years old this season, which for defensive tackle age, like, that's still young. You compare him to Cam Hayward, Calais Campbell, like, you got a lot of juice left in the tank. But $35.3 million per year. Not only did he break the NFL record, he just blew by Chris Jones at $31 million per season. 3 years, $105.8 million contract. This has a direct implication on what the Steelers do with Keanu Benton. And I will say that, and people will come at me right away and say, Benton is nowhere near the player. That is correct. He is not, especially at this stage of his career. He's not Jeffrey Simmons.
No.
But the market has been reset.
Yes.
And reset again twice, really, since the Steelers have even had a chance to think about signing Benton. This past offseason, Jordan Davis got $26 million a year. And before that, it was Milton Williams getting $26 million per year. And now those guys who, for all intents and purposes, were part-time football players, like they never were like full-time every down starters, still getting guru bucks. And now Jeffrey Simmons, who is an all-pro level football player, goes and gets over $35 million per season. It just jacks up the defensive tackle market even further, that is already razor thin on talent throughout the NFL. And like, legitimately, you could probably make a case that Benton is like a top 25 defensive tackle in the league right now, because that's how thin the talent pool is around the NFL right now. He's going to get paid, and I just don't know what it's going to be, but it's worth noting, Shayne, and we talked about this before, not that we necessarily agree with it, but Spot Rack had Keanu Benton's projection at $26 million per season before the Jeffrey Simmons contract. Does that do anything to it? I don't know. I don't think he was going to reach that before, but $20 million plus is certainly not out of the question.
Yeah. And again, like, he's not Jeffrey Simmons at all. And also at this point, you could argue, unless Chris Jones comes back into his own next year and has a better season than he had last year, is anyone Jeffrey Simmons in the NFL? It's maybe not. It's hard to make an argument that he wasn't the best defensive player at that position in the NFL last year. Like, Cam, is as great as he is still older and does lack some of the true juice as a pass rusher, even if he still is a very good one. It's a lot of money for a defensive tackle, but also I feel like the defensive tackle market has lagged behind the edge market, not just because edge is viewed as a more valuable position, even though arguably, like, if you told me, like, would you rather have a world breaking defensive tackle or an edge rusher, I might take the defensive tackle. It's
rarer for sure. Like, there's a lot more talent at defense or edge rusher right now.
And it's just, and you could ask any like quarterback, like, what would they rather deal with? Edge
Yeah.
pressure, interior pressure? Almost every single one of them is telling you I'd rather deal with an edge rusher because it's just a lot easier to scheme those guys out of things. It's a lot easier to step up in the pocket and away from guys. If the middle of the pocket collapses, there's almost nothing you can do sometimes because even if the edge rush didn't get home yet, now you have to go run at those guys to get away from the interior pressure you just got. Like, I'm surprised the market is as big of a disparity as it is at the top at this point, honestly. So for him to get 35.3 million, I don't think is an overpay for Jeffrey Simmons. And I think honestly, that 25-ish million is probably what you're paying for an above average defensive tackle at this point. Like that's just the baseline.
Yeah.
So I won't be surprised if Ben ultimately gets that, whether it's with the Steelers or if he has a good year next year in the open market after that.
Yeah. What's interesting and what I found interesting about this, Shayne, was the fact that he did not just exceed Chris Jones's number, he exceeded it by $4 million per year. Typically, when you see that type of jump, it's because you're poaching a guy in free agency, right? It's not a team re-signing their own football player. So we're kind of seeing these precedents being set here. We did see another player at a different position who got poached, Tyler Linderbaum, who just obliterated the center market. And we'll talk about Zach Frazier next offseason in detail, I'm sure.
They're like, we'll pay you whatever you want.
Got money to spare. That's the problem. When these teams have so much cash they have to spend in a 3-year window, it kind of just messes everything up a little bit. You always hope, Shayne, just in the back of my mind, and this is something that probably a lot of fans don't think about, but it's like, I always hope the guys that are resetting the market happen to be at positions that the Steelers don't need to pay right away.
That's ideal.
But for whatever reason, it does seem like they kind of coincide a little bit. We'll see how this ultimately ends up maybe impacting the Keanu Benton deal. Does like Benton deal get done? Like, I think that's something that's worth talking about at this point. Are they able to get in more? Is he just going to say, no, I'm going to bet on myself. You guys are going to play me at nose tackle again this year. You're going to try to lowball me. I'm going to go bet on myself. I'm going to play and have a good season and hit the market next year. I just saw what Milton Williams went for last offseason. So why not? I mean, he could bet on himself for sure.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if I was his agent, like outside of obviously you worried about injury and wanting to guarantee money and all that stuff, but like outside of injury worries, like there's no way I'd sign a deal right now if I was Benton, especially if it's being reported, and we've talked about this, the fact that Patrick Graham seems to have a plan for him that's not what it's been. So which tells me he's probably going to be better.
He's probably better than anything that he's had before. Yeah.
So to me, if I was his agent, I'd be like, listen, you probably don't want to sign a deal, at least until you get to show what you could do in maybe a different role. And then maybe you end up getting like the Steelers realize what's happening midseason. They're like, hey, what do you think about this deal? You know, like something like that. Outside of that, like I don't know if I'd sign a deal right now if I was Ben.
Yeah, you're only going to look so good anyway when you're playing 0 technique and 1 technique. When you're 3 technique and you only have so many opportunities to get after the quarterback. I do think that he's going to have a career year if I had to guess. And so he probably would be wise to bet on himself. We will find out some point down the line here. Let's talk about Kyle Pitts, though, and the tight end market as well, because Kyle Pitts just earned the largest 3-year contract in NFL history for a tight end. $18 million per season, $54 million in total, $36 million in guarantees. This is a big contract for a guy that has no blocking ability, has been kind of up and down over his career and is coming off of a good season, but it makes you probably glad the Steelers were able to just sign Darnell Washington when they did for $10 million. And these two players could not be more different.
They literally, if you needed to find two different people that play the same position ever, it might be these two.
Yeah, it probably is. And I would agree that receiving ability overall is more important. It helps you move the chains and put the ball in the end zone. I think Darnell has some of that, but again, you're talking nearly twice the money at this point. And so is he going to be the second best tight end in the NFL? I don't know, but that's what he's paid like right now. And in just leapfrogging the market in the previous top at the position there.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because Pitts is very much like he's really more of like a slot or X receiver than he is a tight end, like in terms of skill set. And obviously it's a little bit interesting with the Falcons because they have Drake London, who's not a traditional number 1 receiver in the sense that he's much more of that like physical slot possession type of receiver. He's not really an X receiver in the traditional sense. They don't have a ton of other established like star level players, especially on offense. Pitts is kind of in this weird category of a guy that is clearly useful and productive, but he just doesn't always play with the consistency you want him to to play with. And
Mhm.
honestly, it's just, what is the role going to end up looking like for him long term? Like, is he going to be more of a true just receiver? Are they going to ask him to do more stuff from the tight ends position? Or I don't really know what Stefanski's going to do here, but I do think the fact they paid him tells me that he has a plan for him for sure.
Yeah, just throw a question out to you really quick here, Shayne. I do like Kyle Pitts more than either Steelers tight end right now, I would say. But would you rather have the combination of Freiermuth and Washington at $22 million or Kyle Pitts, just Kyle Pitts at $18 million?
I would definitely rather have the combination of the guys we have, because you have the balance of skill sets then. Because I think just having Kyle Pitts limits you a little bit if you don't have a quality number 2 tight end to block for him and to play more in line, which you could still maybe get for cheaper. But if I'm given those two scenarios, I'd rather have the balance of skill sets, because then you can spread things out a little bit more. So
yeah, I think I would too. And I would roll the dice on Darnell Washington, maybe even taking that next step forward in his game as well. All right. You are tuned into the Still Curtain podcast, where Steelers fans come to talk, celebrate, and debate. For more coverage, hit up stillcurtain.com, powered by the passionate fans at Fansided. Please leave us a rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts. Check us out on TikTok as well, our new TikTok channel over there. All right, Shayne, we are going to start dissecting the wild what-if scenarios for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And these are some that I just came up with off the top of my head. They're things that I've thought about occasionally. Like, let's do a podcast out of this. We're in the slowest time of the football calendar year. There's no functional news happening right now, nothing that impacts the team greatly. So let's dive into some of these things. Let's start with this one. What if the Steelers had drafted Creed Humphrey in 2021? Now, with each of these, Shayne, I want to take it back, look at what happened, and then maybe look at what could have been. Now, again, this is all hypothetical. We don't know. We can't see into the future. But these obviously would have had a different impact on the team. So if you recall the 2021 draft, that's when the Steelers took Najee Harris. I believe it was 24th overall. They ran that card to the podium. Mike Tomlin loved him. They were very comfortable with that selection. And so in the first round, I was banging the table. Humphrey, I really like this guy. Amazing Senior Bowl, 100th percentile athlete testing-wise at the position. Really good pass protector on film at Oklahoma. I liked everything about him. I wanted him in the first round. First round come and goes. Second round, I'm like, oh my, he's still here. I will take this guy again. Let me bang that table again. Steelers take Pat Freiermuth. And I'm like, okay, that was an on-value selection. I don't hate it, but I would have liked Humphrey heck of a lot better still. He ends up going to the Chiefs at the end of the second round. Perennial all-pro football player. Has been maybe the best center in the league ever since. What could have been different, Shayne, had the Steelers taken Humphrey instead of Najee Harris in the first round? What kind of ripple effect would that have had on the team?
If we're going with them taking him in the first round opposed to where they took Freiermuth in the second round, which I think both are interesting. Like, obviously, you could have just taken him instead of Freiermuth, which is probably what would have happened if they wanted to go with the center instead.
I mean, I straight up had him as a better prospect than Najee Harris.
Oh yeah, I get that. Like I feel like multiple people did. I still don't really know what happened with Humphrey in that draft. Like, I don't know if it's
left-handed center. Like, that was some of the talk around that before, but
center's weird.
I mean, like, in the window would have lined up perfectly too, because Pouncey was on the way out.
Yeah,
he was entering the final year of his career. So
it was strange, right? Like it to me though, ultimately, I think what happens if you take Humphrey at 24 specifically, right? They still had a massive need at running back, right? Like they did. So you assume then with 55 that you'd be looking at a running back. The problem is I don't really know who they take, because I think after it was Najee, like it started
ETN
to get
was gone.
Yeah, ETN was gone. For example, let's say at 55, obviously is where they look instead of maybe they do take Freiermuth at 55 still or whatever, right? But even then, like if you go from pick 55 on, the next running back taken after, I think, let me double check who the next running back was taken. So ETN goes to 25, and then I think it's Javonte Williams at 35. And then I don't know if another running back is taken. Yeah, not at 55. So the next running back taken after Freiermuth, for example, I believe was Trey Sermon. Yeah. Which not good, obviously. Was on this team briefly, so there's that. Not very good though. And then after him, it's Michael Carter, who has done some stuff in the NFL, but not been particularly great. Like, Ramondre Stevenson, maybe.
Yeah, and so assuming like that's the case, Shayne, like let's say the Steelers would have been just determined to go running back in the second round had they missed out on running back in the first round. You could argue that 1-2 combination is not ideal. No. Now, would you rather have Creed Humphrey, a 10-12 year all-pro center, or would you rather have Najee Harris on his rookie contract, which is what Steelers got him for, and Pat Freiermuth?
Well, obviously, you take Creed Humphrey. Pat's been a good tight end.
It's still the right choice.
Yeah,
but
I think ideally, if I had the decision of like what 2 players you take it the first and second round, like you take Humphrey instead of Harris, and then you still take Freiermuth, and then you kind of go from there and look, because then you don't have to, because this is the thing.
That would have been
because they didn't take Creed Humphrey, they took Kendrick Green, who then went on to be terrible.
That was the next point I was going to bring up. Not only did you miss out, so let's backtrack a second.
Yeah,
you pass on Humphrey in the first round, you pass on Humphrey in the second round. Third round comes around, and Quinn Miners is on the board, who love, who was the star of the Senior Bowl, and was just a really, really good small school prospect. I mean, I would have ran that card to the podium. Yeah. Instead, they go for scheme fit over talent. In my mind, is exactly what they did.
Sure.
And they took Kendrick Green, who I had some serious doubt. I had a 5th round grade on Kendrick Green, some serious doubts about his size and play strength, and that showed up big time early in his Steelers career. So I would have taken Miners after that. But yes, it would have prevented the Kendrick Green disaster there. But one good thing I think that came from it, if we're trying to stretch for a good thing here, is the Steelers probably would have never drafted Zach Frazier, who is awesome in his own right.
Yeah, he is great. So like they ended up still finding their center of the future, and obviously Creed is still better, and I think Frazier is going to be one of those guys who's maybe a tier just below the very top guys in the NFL. I don't know if he has the same upside physically and some of the stuff like that, but it's close enough that like it's not bad. It's not a bad outcome they ended up with. The problem was because of who they did take instead. The offensive line was terrible in Ben's last year, and it kind of needed to keep getting built up, and it just never really got there until really now, basically. It did kind of set them back, especially because even though Najee was productive, like the offensive line, and this goes to the example of like Ashton Genty last year and some other first-round running backs. No matter how talented the guy is, and I think Najee, was kind of uniquely talented, but just not very explosive. If you don't have an offensive line that can allow those players to do what they do, it just doesn't matter how good they are. It doesn't.
Yeah.
And they took the running back over the offensive line, and that's what teams who consistently fail at taking first-round running backs do. Yeah. They don't wait until they actually can allow them the space and ability to do things before they actually draft them. It's just this weird like thing that teams keep doing, and I hope that eventually stops happening.
Yeah.
But that's what it seems is the case most of the time.
Yeah, the philosophy was so bad. And not only that, but I think the Steelers, just especially late in Kevin Colbert's tenure, they were not forward thinking enough. They were about here and now. Well, Pouncey's still here for this season. Sure, he's old and he's pretty bad at this stage of his career. I could get a guy and I can slot him in at guard or something for now and then start him at center. Like, they have to look more beyond than just the present season, or you're not going to draft well at times. And that's exactly what happened late in his tenure. Let's talk about a player that we don't talk about nearly enough on this podcast because he's just the best ever. And that's Troy Polamalu. My favorite Steeler of all time. And I might be a little bit biased here, but this one does not impact. Of course, we could go back and talk about what if happened if the Steelers had not drafted Troy Polamalu and not traded up for him back in the 2000s.
Not good.
Draft. Do they have a fewer Super Bowl right now? Like,
probably.
I mean, that Colts game leading up to the 2008 Super Bowl, like, just phenomenal performance there. He was, I mean, again, it's Troy Polamalu.
The AFC Championship game alone to get them to that Super Bowl against the Ravens, like what he did.
So we could go back there, Shayne, but I want to spin this differently and take it from a different angle. This one doesn't affect the Steelers. Like, what would have changed historically? It's what would Polamalu look like if he played in the NFL today? So what if he was in the NFL today? Does he play the same role? Let's assume that he's not playing under Keith Butler and he's just coming onto the Steelers right now or into the NFL in general right now. What does his role look like in this league, in the modern NFL, where it's the really quick passing game? It's just a lot has changed since the early 2000s, where they used to have those heat-seeking missiles at safety. You had Polamalu and Bob Sanders and those type of players who are big impact splash players. What do you think his role would have looked like in today's NFL? Is he like a nickel linebacker hybrid? What do you do with him?
That's such a fascinating. I love this what if because it's fascinating to think about. First of all, I want to just talk about like the fact that obviously, so he was drafted in 2003, and obviously, like, oh, how high would Troy Polamalu go? I don't think people think about this much, but like at this was his pro day, so obviously it's a little different.
Yeah,
it's then different than combine numbers, whatever. 4.35 to 4.4 in the 40, and a nearly 44-inch vertical jump at 5'10".
Insane.
I mean, he was 5'10", like 206 pounds. Like he'd be drafted very, very high now.
Yeah,
like that. Just throwing that out there. In this very much like too high centric world, I do wonder, like, first of all, he would not play the role he did with the Steelers because the role he played with the Steelers is a role that no one's ever played ever before.
Yeah.
So it's because it was like, hey, Troy.
It was his own role. Yeah.
Go do stuff. And he was like, all right. So I do think ultimately, like, the best way you could utilize him and how I think he'd be used, and especially like the Mike McDonald-esque systems that are starting to proliferate the league right now. He's that like hybrid nickel safety role player because he's not super tall, but he was big. Obviously, the explosiveness, the tackling ability, the playmaking instincts, like they're going to want this dude at the line of scrimmage most of the time. And then obviously he can do the thing he did with the Steelers anyway, which is like, oh, I'm in the box. Oops, I'm actually 40 yards downfield right now anyway, because who cares? And the rules don't apply to me. Like they could do some of that stuff with him from that alignment where he could back off all of a sudden and play in like in a middle field role or whatever you need him to do, but keep him at the line of scrimmage where he can attack and do some of the crazy stuff he used to do for the Steelers. That to me is easily the best role for NFL if they're going to do that. Oh, I think we just had.
There we go. You're back.
But that to me is easily the best role for him, is that kind of hybrid nickel that we've seen start to become more popular, where more of a safety body type is in that role as opposed to a traditional slot corner.
Yeah, you absolutely want him near the line of scrimmage. I think he would play that star role in today's NFL.
That's the terminology used for most systems.
You would move him around from a slot defender to a box safety to a nickel linebacker at times, and you would have him. I think that whoever your defense coordinator is, wherever he would go in today's NFL, you'd find out really quickly this guy knows what he's doing. He's got a knack for playmaking ability. So you're going to want him to get him near the line of scrimmage, involved all the time. But just spectacular football player, one of one. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there won't be another player like him, first ballot.
I don't know if there's will ever be allowed to be a player like him again.
There may not be,
because defenses, like, they're more multiple and there's more things that guys are asked to do now, but no one has ever been allowed to kind of just play whatever he wanted to do and just be kind of given free reign from the safety position, because it's the safety position. Usually those guys are not really allowed to freelance, because that's how you give up 60-yard touchdowns usually in the NFL. It's just that Troy was actually doing the opposite by doing that, and that's just not normal, right? So I do think he would be a different player, but not necessarily a worse player. It would just be a different type of role for him, because he wouldn't be able to probably be given as much free reign as he did for the Steelers, just out of just how it works now. But
Shayne, I crack up listening to Dick LeBeau and Bill Cowher talk about Polamalu in his playing days, and they're just enthralled with the guy. They
how could you not be?
It was Cowher, I believe, who said it was not that long ago when he showed up on something. I can't remember what it was, but he was talking about Ryan Clark first coming to the team. And he's like, now Polamalu is going to do things sometimes where you're going to just kind of have to read what he's doing and kind of do the opposite. I'm paraphrasing here, but and he's like, oh, so we can kind of just do whatever. And he goes, no, you can't do whatever you want. He can do whatever you want. Yeah. So it's like I said, there won't be another one of that.
No, I don't think so. No.
Let's talk about Darnell Washington here, Shayne. A really interesting topic, because again, this guy is massive. I mean, he just recently again talked about how enormous he is, and he's got to keep his weight under control. And even as early as his rookie season, he got really big. And we were saying, this guy could play tackle. Like, he's got the length and strength to do it. I want to ask you, what if Darnell Washington had moved to tackle as a rookie back in 2023? How would that have impacted things? Now, my initial thought is we would assume right away he would be a backup, maybe the swing tackle behind Dan Moore and Broderick Jones. And then maybe when Dan Moore leaves and gets that $88 million contract, absurd, it was $84 million contract by the Titans, maybe as early as his second season, he's thrust into a starting role as a tackle. And how would that have changed the future outlook? Is there no Fautanu at that point if he played well enough? Is there no Max Yanicher?
That's the part about this that's hard, because I think if you legitimately, like, the problem is when they drafted him, right, he wasn't really looking like an offensive tackle. Right?
No, I mean, he was thin at the combine.
Yeah,
thin,
he was slim.
264.
He was slimmed up for what he was going to ultimately be.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if they committed to him, like being like, hey, like, we know the best thing you do is as a blocker. You come in a little heavier than you were at the combine. Let's just pack the pounds on and make you a tackle. I don't know if he develops fast enough necessarily body-wise and also technique-wise to convince them not to still address tackle in 2024 with Fautanu. And then if that happens, it comes down to, can he just straight up beat Broderick Jones out? Which if I'm putting on my like my optimistic glasses, we'll say, right?
Yeah.
Probably, based on what we've seen from Broderick. I think that just the natural athleticism is as athletic as Broderick is. I do think Washington would be even more so, even if he added enough weight to be a true offensive tackle. I just wonder again, like, does he get the opportunity to play the way that he has a tight end enough to convince them that he should be a starting player at tackle?
Yeah.
Right. As of right now, like, would he be a starting player right now for them? I don't know. Would he be more of like the sixth offensive lineman who actually legitimately catches passes, which is kind of what he is now, just not actually. It's like, I wonder if that would still just end up being his role and just less in the passing game, though, because he focuses on offensive line, which honestly might end up not being a better fit than what he is right now for the Steelers. So.
Yeah, I mean, you hope that he obviously in this hypothetical would be more than a Spencer Anderson. You would want him to be like, this is a full-blown starting offensive tackle with upside. Yeah. Like, I keep going back to the cross Steelers comparison because it's semi-recent. Alejandro Villanueva was a college wide receiver turned defensive end for the Eagles for a little bit. Had the 2 tours in Afghanistan, I believe it was 2, and then he came back to the Steelers and made a successful transition to offensive tackle. Obviously got way bigger from the time he was in college until that time. And even in his later 20s, like, was able to do it and be a 2-time Pro Bowler, I think, as a 6'9" guy with a long wingspan. Like, it is possible. You can absolutely do it. We've seen success stories like that in the NFL. Is it rare? It's exceptionally rare. Jordan Mailata, exceptionally rare to go from a rugby player to
he's also just
a star NFL tackle.
Yeah, maybe the freakiest freak that's ever been.
So freaky. But I would say, like, Darnell Washington is a 99 percentile athlete at tight end.
That's true.
So if you move him to tackle, what is his percentile as a tackle? It's 100 percentile.
Yeah, I'm curious what it would look like as a full size thing. Again, I think the question just comes down to, like, does he develop fast enough to end up getting on the field
for sure
to prove that he actually should be starting, and then is he starting then, right? Because I think with the role he has now, I think the fact that he's so unique is what makes him special. And I don't know if he would be unique outside of being a unique athlete at tackle, right? Where as a tight end, he's so big, but still so effective as a receiver that it does make him kind of a one of one, versus would he just be at best maybe an above average tackle because of how athletic he is and gifted he is. That's where it's like, technically you rather have the above average tackle in the grand scheme of things, but that's a harder outcome to reach than what he's done as a tight end.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, again, you don't know, obviously we don't know how this would turn out. We don't know if he would be a great tackle or if he'd just be solid for the position. He's obviously a very good blocker as a tight end. It's hard to say for sure. 3rd round draft capital, you think the Steelers would have at least given him a chance had they gone that route and say, we've got something fairly significant, a day 2 pick invested in you. We're going to try everything we can to make this transition work. As it is, he's not making that transition. He is a big guy in the 300s still. And he said he wants to get down. I think 285, 295 is what he said he wants his playing weight to be. We'll see.
That's if more reasonable, probably.
It's more reasonable. I have
long term.
And I have a TikTok short video on that if you want to go check that out, about Darnell's playing weight, why it would be beneficial for him to slim down a little bit and why it'd be better for his career as a tight end. Let's talk about if the Steelers had not traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick. And so what if they would have never made that trade back in 2019 that really helped salvage a season that, quite frankly, they probably shouldn't have salvaged in hindsight. Now, the trade was successful. They got their first round pick worth out of Fitzpatrick. So I don't want anybody to misquote me here. He was excellent. And like from the moment the Steelers got him, fantastic. I think early, like in that 49ers game, all the splash plays he made, he just had a legitimate, deserving first team all-pro level season. The problem was in that year, Ben Roethlisberger tore his elbow 2.5 games into the season, second game into the season. I think it was against the Seahawks. The Steelers would go on to finish 8-8. And so it was kind of a wasted year in a sense. And I have to ask too, like, did Minkah swing a few of those games? Maybe they would have had a losing record and maybe they would have had a first round pick. Would they have been in prime position to say, hey, Justin Herbert is a few spots away from us. Like, let's move up and get him.
That's the biggest part of this is like, does that 2019 season completely unravel if Minkah isn't on the team? And I think you could make an argument for that being the case.
He was so good. Yeah.
Because he was phenomenal. The thing is even if, let's say the Steelers have their first round pick, but it's still like 14, maybe they just have a losing record. Maybe it's, 7-9 or whatever it would have been, or, something like that. They also, if they liked him enough, which I don't know off the top of my head what the reports were on this because they didn't have a first round pick. Yeah. But Jordan Love was drafted 26th. Yeah. Like, do they just like him and just take a quarterback because it's
possible? Yeah.
Not saying that obviously, like, if I had the option, as much as I think Jordan Love is a good player, I'd still rather have Justin Herbert, obviously. But if he's in range, Herbert too, obviously is an option. Then again, I don't know if the Chargers allow that to happen. I think, assuming the chart. Now, granted, I believe the Steelers beat the Chargers that year. So maybe if the Chargers beat them without Minkah, maybe that changes anyway. But point is, I don't know if you can get up for Herbert. But again, Jordan Love is there. Like, then wouldn't even have to move.
That's a good consolation prize, isn't it?
I'd be happy with that, especially if you sat.
So Justin Herbert went 6. Shayne, he was the third quarterback taken. Now maybe they would have said, okay, we are sitting here. Let's say Minkah did swing a game, and now instead of 8-8, they're 7-9, and you've got a top 15 pick in the draft. You've got to move up 10 spots essentially to go get Herbert. I think that's possible. Knowing the Steelers, though, in knowing Kevin Colbert, again, late in his tenure, he may have just been fine saying, we got Ben Roethlisberger for 1 more year. We're going to give him whatever we can give him. And maybe, or 2 more years, I guess, at this point. He was old. He was 36, I think, at that stage. So obviously drafting a transition quarterback would have been a wise idea, especially as Roethlisberger started to decline ever since like the 2018 season. But had they not gone that route, there was another option. Like, let's assume he did swing a game. The Steelers could have picked CeeDee Lamb right there without a trade up. Like, they would have had they would have been in the right position to do that. And why would you not? Like, this was shortly after Antonio Brown forced his way out of Pittsburgh. Yeah. You drafted, you spent a 2nd round pick on James Washington in 2018. That wouldn't have stopped you from going out and getting CeeDee Lamb. Like, this was a guy who had no business being there with the 17th overall pick. Like, and so if I could tell you 1-for-1 trade, would you have rather had those years of Minkah Fitzpatrick or CeeDee Lamb? Like, you look at it that way, I would take CeeDee 10 times out of 10.
Yeah. And if there's another one, let's say he made 2 games flip, right? Tristan Wirfs.
Wirfs was right there too. Yeah.
13, probably going to be in range to take him ahead of Tampa. It's just, again, this is the problem when you trade a first round pick. It's not that Minkah wasn't as, like, the trade itself in a vacuum was successful without a doubt. Like, that's not really up for debate at all. The problem is what could have potentially happened means that you get a player for how many years it was, as great as he was. Would it have been better to have CeeDee Lamb or Tristan Wirfs or one of these quarterbacks? Probably, yeah. So it just comes down to, like, obviously they would have had to draft the right player. And it's possible, especially during this time, that they would not have done that. Maybe they take, Javon Kinlaw, like the Niners did at 14, or they take Jerry Jeudy because, oh, look, the route running. Like, it's possible none of this happens anyway because they just take the wrong player. Yeah. But the opportunities they would have had they had that pick obviously affect how you feel about all of this ultimately.
Yeah, and there were busts mixed in there as well. So it's a coin flip. Maybe they would have gotten far worse than Minka, but it is interesting to think about because just in the scope of things, looking back on it, 2020 would have felt like the perfect year to grab that transitional quarterback as you move away from like a 36-year-old Ben Roethlisberger. You can sit him a year or two behind Ben if you needed to, develop him, and then have him just kind of hit the ground running when he's ready. It was a good quarterback class overall. It was tanking for Tua, and ultimately it was a 6 touchdown Joe Burrow that went number one overall as he deserved to. But it was a really good quarterback class, and it would have been an interesting decision there. Let's keep it with that. In 2020, Shayne, the Steelers didn't have that first round pick because of Minka.
Yep.
There was still a chance to draft a quarterback. In fact, I remember exactly where I was the moment the Steelers were on the clock with their second round pick.
Yep.
And Jalen Hurts, the camera was panning on him, and it looked like there was a chance because the Steelers did their homework on Hurts. They had an old Roethlisberger.
Yep.
This felt like a really good time, and I was a fan of Hurts. Like I know that he didn't have the best arm or anything. Now he was mobile, he was durable, he was tough. He made a lot of big plays in college, and I was 100% on board with Hurts. He was the best player available on my board when the Steelers were on the clock. What does the team look like right now? Had you drafted Jalen Hurts over Chase Claypool? Now, and we could take it one step further. Without Chase Claypool, there's no Joey Porter Jr. on the roster right now either. True. So that's a lot for you to unpack right now.
That's you going a little too far. So here's what I'll tell you. Based on what, like, because you take Claypool out and you switch him in for whoever, or say who cared, whatever. Because he had the great rookie season, but other than that, it wasn't particularly great. You assume obviously Ben plays in 2020, maybe also 2021, whatever. Based on what they did from a decision-making standpoint, and maybe they do change some stuff. Maybe they don't keep on Canada and they try to bring an offensive coordinator better fit for Hurts or whatever, which with them, who knows if that matters, right? But based on how the offensive infrastructure was during the time period that Hurts would have been probably given the chance to start, I don't think he succeeds, and I think that they move on from him after his rookie deal anyway.
Yeah, this is a good talent versus draft position versus like scheme debate where how much of the talent would have shown through. And I know that you're not the biggest Jalen Hurts fans in terms of him being an actual franchise quarterback. I do think that he entered a very favorable situation with an amazing offensive line and Nick Sirianni, who is innovative. Like, he had a lot of factors going in his favor. But I also don't want to completely take away the fact that he's a 3-time Pro Bowl quarterback, and then he has like a 57-25 career record, and then he's a Super Bowl winning QB who was awesome in that last the most recent Super Bowl run. Like, he had some really good moments. I think the Steelers, had they stuck with it and assuming that they would have had at least a fairly competent level offensive mind, which I don't give them any credit for because they haven't had one of those in a while. But I do think it would be better than what they had. And maybe Shayne, he's at least a guy that can help you bridge that gap, like from Roethlisberger to the next guy, like 3 or 4 years later. Maybe they don't cycle through quite so many quarterbacks.
That would be the biggest difference. I ultimately still just think that Hurts is in a really weird category of quarterback for me, where I think objectively there's too many avenues where he can be a starting level quarterback for you to move off of him easily, especially for the Eagles, who have such a good team around him and have had that. But I think he's very much a quarterback that is reliant on his surrounding cast in a lot of ways, specifically because if he doesn't have the right type of players, and not just great players, but the right type of players around him, he just simply can't operate at a high level in the passing game. And with Steelers, I just have no reason to believe, based on how they've operated over the past 5 years, to think that they would have been able to offer him that, right? And if you can't offer him the right skill sets and the right level of talent, he's probably a below average starting quarterback in those situations, especially if he's coming up through that system, right? Because with the Eagles, like, he did play a little bit as a rookie, but then, comes in his second year as a starter, and he slowly builds up to the player he was at his best in 2023, 2024. That's the version of Jalen Hurts that I think is a franchise level player, played like one. I don't think he ever gets there with the Steelers specifically.
Yeah, it is I mean, we can, again, go down a rabbit hole here when it comes to quarterback talent. How much is the organization and the coaching staff? Like if Dak Prescott were drafted by the Jets, does he ever get a chance to play and perform? If Ben Roethlisberger was drafted by the Browns, does he become the player that he is for that franchise? Like it's worth debating at least. And it's kind of fun food for thought there. I want to talk about this one, Shayne. What if Kevin Colbert had retired 1 year sooner? He was going year to year on 1 year contracts late in his tenure with the Steelers. And had he just hung it up a little bit sooner and the Steelers made that transition 1 year sooner, it makes you wonder, would they still have taken that swing? How much of it was Colbert saying, it is my duty to find this team a franchise quarterback on my way out. And that's why during the pre-draft process, I'm not even going to Ohio State's pro day and some of these other big pro days along the way, because I'm solely focused on finding a quarterback in a wretched quarterback class that included Matt Corral and Malik Willis, who is clearly the best of the group at this point, and Kenny Pickett. And it's like, they ultimately decided on Pickett. We knew with 100% certainty based on their visits and their interest during the pre-draft process and the way they talked that they were going to draft a quarterback. It was just a matter of which one. They were all bad. Like none of them deserved to go where they went. Would it have changed in knowing like the new organization you usher in, let's say that Khan and Weidel come there a year sooner and are put into the positions of power they're put in, they probably wouldn't have felt the pressure to say, we have to do this right now. Do you agree with that? And how would that have changed things?
So real quick, just because I don't want us to get clipped into oblivion if someone were to take it out of context,
Yeah.
Brock Purdy was drafted in this draft, so he is the best.
But nobody would have taken him there. Like,
I'm just saying.
Yes,
you said Willis is the best of the bunch. I'm like, technically,
yes. I backtrack. It was Brock Purdy, but nobody knew it. The guy was freaking yes, almost undrafted.
Yeah, that's revisionist history.
Great success story, by the way. Brock Purdy.
I just don't want you to end up being.
Thank you.
This guy thinks Malik Willis is better. No.
Yes.
Anyway, point is.
Yes,
I think of the quarterbacks who could have been drafted relatively high. Yes, like Willis is the best, which is sad because he hasn't really gotten much of a chance to even play yet. But whatever. I do think there's a chance that Khan looks at the situation as like, I simply can't draft Pickett in the first round. Like objectively speaking, I think that's possible. Now he is still part of that infrastructure. He does in a lot of ways, I think, still think in the same ways, but I think he's smarter about how he goes about getting that done, opposed to being like, oh, I need to do this. It's like, well, no, I need to actually do this thing, which is sort of what the Steelers would do, but like in my own kind of way. I actually think there's a good chance that if he's the general manager, instead of taking Pickett, he does take a swing on a quarterback later. Maybe it's Willis, maybe it's someone else, whatever. But I think what he does instead is probably draft like either Tyler Smith.
Yeah, it probably is offensive line. I mean, they made that a very clear emphasis.
Like maybe even Tyler Linderbaum, potentially, because Kendrick Green was terrible. So like maybe they're just like, we'll just take him instead. But I think that's more likely than him taking Pickett. Although you could still make the argument that like maybe it was an organizational philosophy of like, we have to get the Pitt guy because we screwed it up last time. We could have got the Pitt guy 40 years ago, which is terrible. Maybe the dumbest thing anyone could ever do, but that's beside the point. I do think there's a chance he still does it if he fell in line with like the organizational thinking on it. However, ultimately, I would like to think he takes a swing on like one of the offensive linemen, or maybe even the guy taken right after him, Trent McDuffie.
Yeah, and I think there's a chance that he still would have taken a quarterback as well, just knowing that what are your other options at that point? We can kind of take this swing now. I would hope that wouldn't have been the case, but if they would have, it's not necessarily mean it would have been Kenny Pickett. Maybe they would have valued different traits, but I have a feeling it probably would have been an offensive lineman, considering that they drafted an offensive lineman in the first round, 3 of Khan's first 4 seasons, offensive lineman in the first round. Yep. They probably would have wanted to build the trenches like they're doing now. And side note here, how about Kevin Colbert recently doubling down on the Kenny Pickett selection, saying that it was a successful pick? No, it was not. You need to bite the bullet and say, yeah, I messed up. I kind of set this team back a little bit.
Nobody.
It was a terrible
needs
pick.
Nobody needs to justify this pick at this point. Everyone.
You're not
The guy played for like 4 teams in 4 months or something or whatever it was. Like, you can't. There's no way you can justify it because he said something. I think it was about his record. It's like, yeah, his record was good because the Steelers don't lose games. Okay,
it would have been just as good with Trubisky or whoever.
What's funny is I think Trubisky's like the only one who might have. I still think if they start him, they might have had a losing season.
Maybe not Trubisky, but anybody else.
I forget what his record is, but it's below 500. I'm pretty sure he might be the only quarterback who started multiple games for this team recently that hasn't had a winning record.
Yeah,
but the point is like using his record as a reason to determine how successful the pick is an insane thing for anyone who held a general manager position to say. It kind of tells you probably why his last 5-6 years did not go exactly super well. So that's all I'm saying with that.
They did not go well. If I don't know how much it would have changed, but again, it would have had some sort of ripple effect. If you go, let's say offensive lineman in 2021, 2022, then maybe you don't the following year, but either way, I think, and again, I've said this many times, and I was adamant from year to year to year, it was 5 years too long for Kevin Colbert. Like from 2018 on, it was good. I've got a need. How do I fill it? Let me scroll down until I find the player at the right position, and I'm going to click the draft button. Oh, there's Terrell Edmonds and James Washington, and
for a long time.
It was so beyond infuriating because when you study the draft and you see that those guys everybody was taken like a round or two too early. It felt like in that stretch. And so again, it's over now. And I think that the Steelers are on the right track. We just talked about the 10 most valuable assets on the team. If you missed that discussion, we did it last week on the show. So go back and check that out. I've got one more for you here, Shayne, and that is one that we're going to have to go back in time a little bit for, but could have just completely changed franchise history for the Steelers. And that is, what if Ben Roethlisberger had been traded back in the 2010 offseason? And this was seriously on the table. In fact, the Steelers had a legitimate trade offer on the table with the San Francisco 49ers. General manager Mike Singletary ultimately turned it down because of some of Ben's off-field issues. We don't need to dive into that right now.
Yeah.
But had this happened, now, again, this would have already come after the Steelers' 2 Super Bowl wins of the 2000s. They would make the Super Bowl and lose against the Green Bay Packers. But their 2 Super Bowl wins had already come. And so from that point, like, you've already had a really all the success, the peak success you would get out of Ben Roethlisberger. He would go on to have a Hall of Fame level career. And so fans obviously are very glad that didn't happen, despite the fact that they never won a Super Bowl after that. They played in a lot of really big games, and they made another Super Bowl. What would have spiraled, and how would you think things would have transpired had they traded Ben Roethlisberger in the 2010 offseason?
This one's really fascinating because it really comes down to, I think, 3 things. One, what team actually trades for him and what do they get? Because the Raiders were apparently involved, the Niners, they were talking to the Rams. Like, assuming one of those teams takes him. In the 2010 draft, first of all, if the Rams would have given up the first overall pick, that means the Steelers would have drafted Sam Bradford almost assuredly to replace Ben Roethlisberger, which that one hurts my head a little bit. Nothing against Sam Bradford. He was just certifiably mid at the best points in his career. So I don't think that changes with the Steelers, frankly. So that's a possibility, but more likely it's someone like the Raiders, because that sounds like something the Raiders would do. And if they gave up the 8th pick, for example, in that trade, which I'm assuming they would, they drafted Rolando McClain. I don't know if the Steelers would have drafted him, but like that's the type of player that they got with that pick, who was pretty good when he actually was like playing. He just didn't do that much for a myriad of reasons. It again, like in the 2010 draft, outside of Bradford, who was pretty okay. I mean, the quarterbacks, Jimmy Clausen.
It was so bad. And
Tim
so if it's
Tebow.
a 1-for-1 trade, Shayne, it's like you are getting so much worse at the position. It would be one of those situations. And even with Bradford, like a few years later, you would probably have to go and try to replace him potentially, depending on how things went in Pittsburgh. Clausen, for sure, you would have like a year or 2 after at most. So, yeah, I mean, we'd be looking for a quarterback. And then it makes you wonder how many years consecutively would the Steelers be in that track of we need a quarterback, can't stop until you find one?
I honestly think because of the way that Tomlin was and the way that this organization is, we might have just had the scenario we're having right now, but like 10 years earlier, where they
it might have
just
been.
keep winning too much
Mhm.
despite the quarterback position to actually replace the quarterback that they lost. So they just keep like signing, like this team probably would have ended up the Carson Palmer team somehow, or they
Yeah.
would have ended up like that type of stuff would have ended up happening, right? We're like, oh, we got to find a veteran because we just can't draft one good enough because we're 8-8 every year.
Yep.
Like that's the issue that it kind of comes back to, is like, even let's say they traded for a 2011 pick, right? And let's say they traded San Francisco traded not their 2010 pick, but the 2011 first round pick, and maybe they threw in Alex Smith, who ended up being a really solid quarterback later in his career, but maybe not would have, or maybe wouldn't have been with the Steelers. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
And they end up with, like, let's say that Ben helps them to, like, instead of them being they had the 7th pick in the 2011 draft, maybe he moves them up to like the middle of the pack, right? Because just the quarterback play difference. There's good players in that draft, but not a quarterback past Cam Newton. Like, Andy Dalton was good, but he was a 2nd round pick. I don't know if they take him in the 1st round or whatever. Like, it just you start getting into that mode of like, when do they find a quarterback? And that's the problem that we're in right now, is like, how do you find a quarterback when you're not bad enough to actually just draft one in the top 5? Because they probably still wouldn't have been bad enough with that defense and with everything else they had going on. They would have been just trudging along, probably being like 9-7 every year, trying to win a playoff game like they have been for the past decade here. It just feels like it would be the same thing, just without having 10 years of Ben after 20.
Yeah, no, they were so fortunate. Even going back to that 2004 NFL draft where they kind of lucked into Roethlisberger, and he was still there on the board at 11. And they were thankful they didn't have to take J.P. Lossman. And so, I mean, because again, they would have been stuck. I think like you said, they would have been just year after year, just looking every single year until they found that guy. But yeah, I mean, obviously went on to have great career in Pittsburgh, arguably the best quarterback in Steelers history. There's only 2 really that you could argue, but
he's definitely the best in my opinion. Whether he's like, you could obviously
there's a big chunk of the fan base that would argue against that, but I agree with you. I absolutely agree.
But that's what I mean when I say best, though, is like, he's the better quarterback, I think, significantly than Bradshaw, but Bradshaw was more successful. So you could argue, like, whose career would you rather have?
Yeah,
maybe Terry, because like he kind of just got to sling it out there and have a really good time on a team that was just beating the crap out of everyone. Not saying he wasn't a big part of that, but I'm saying like he didn't have the same level of difficulty at times from an offensive standpoint that Ben did, and just how that kind of works in the modern NFL. It's a fun conversation, but yeah, like, best I think is Ben, but yeah.
All right. If you are a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and like to support the Steel Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Steel Curtain podcast on YouTube. We appreciate all of your support. Go check out our written work on steelcurtain.com. All right, Shayne, just one more thing before we sign off on today's show. That was a fun exercise. If you guys are here, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. Do you like this kind of off-season banter? Do you like the what if scenarios? It's a slow time. We'll keep it up if you like it. Like and comment down below. Like this stream, help us get found as well, and just keep increasing our channel so we can bring you more content. Shayne, let's talk about which Steelers may land on the top 100 list. The NFL is putting out their top 100, and it is just it's a crap show. I mean, it's bad. It's always so bad, and it's comically bad starting off, and I just don't even know what to think of it anymore. But it's something that they try to they have this dramatic slow release, like, oh, you guys
now
can't wait to see
doing it in a funny way now too, which is so interesting to me.
Oh my goodness. So let me, I'm going to read down through the names that have been revealed so far as they slow release this list. And we've only got the first 6 right now, but starting at 100 and going down through 95, number 100 is an aging Cameron Jordan, followed by Quentin Nelson, Bryce Young at 98.
Listen, there's probably not many people on this planet who's more pro Bryce Young than me at this moment in time. And I still, when I saw his name, I'm like, what are we?
I mean, he had some really good moments. He had a 500-yard game, and he played well in the playoffs. But
it's just like, what are we doing, man? Quarterbacks, you can't just have the top 17 quarterbacks, whatever it is, make the list. That's just not. You can't do a top 100.
Shayne, are you a math guy at all? Because I can't do this math in my head, but there's 32 teams.
Yes.
And there are at least 22 starters, not counting like nickel defenders and whatnot. And so that's a lot of football players. That's a lot of starting NFL players.
Yes.
Is Bryce Young in the top 100 of all these NFL starters?
He certainly isn't, in my opinion. But again, like, because he plays quarterback, my question is ultimately going to be, and this is how you kind of have to look at it, unfortunately, how many quarterbacks are going to be on this list? Because if there's going to be 20 quarterbacks on this list, then like whatever then, right?
Yeah. Because if it's in terms of value, obviously you could argue it should be a straight list of quarterbacks and Myles Garrett in there somewhere.
Yeah, sure. But why not? But
but that's not the way these lists should be comprised.
The spirit of this list feels wrong if that's how we're doing it.
It's again, it's voted on by the players. And people will say, "Oh, they're the players; they know best." I don't know how much film they're watching of all these guys all the time. Again, they're entitled to their own opinions. I wouldn't include him on this list. I think that he's got a lot to prove still. We'll see what he does this year. Going down, you've got the linebacker Ernest Jones from the Seattle Seahawks.
I actually agree with that one. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And Travis Etienne, number 96. And then Demario Davis, who is, what is he, like 49 years old at this point? Like,
admittedly, still fantastic.
He's good still. Yeah.
He's very good.
It's funny. The NFL linebackers today, it's like you've got your good guys who are really ancient.
Yep.
And then there's like a talent gap, and you have young guys that you hope can be good. And that's kind of how the linebackers. And
there's just Fred Warner sitting right in the middle of those two things, just being the best player that we got. Like, he's not old yet, but he's not young, but he's still the best one. It's pretty much like, are you Fred Warner, or are you old, or are you young? That's pretty much what it kind of comes down to.
We got a chat in here. Love the conversation. Appreciate that. Keep the comments dropping. Let me talk about this now, Shayne. Is we've seen, obviously, the Steelers, they've got players that make this list. Like it's TJ Watt and Cam Hayward every year. And then sometimes there's a few others. It used to be Minkah Fitzpatrick. He's obviously gone. And if we were just knowing how the NFL players vote, if we're trying to do this as predictively as possible and not necessarily what we would do, who do you think lands on this list? And I would even ask a follow-up question. What ballpark range do you think they land in?
So I think TJ and Cam both make it for sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess that we hear both their names called soon.
Okay.
Actually, because I think,
which is rare in terms of history, because TJ Watt has climbed very high on this list in the past. Shouldn't this time. And again, there's going to be people out there who argue, should he make the top 100 list? And I think that those conversations are certainly justifiable at this stage of his career. He needs a bounce back season. What we saw in last year was not particularly great. We've had the conversation. Is he currently the best edge rusher on the team right now? And I'm not convinced that he is, but I agree with you. Watt will be on this list somewhere.
He will be. And I do think so. To give you an idea, going into this past season, I believe he was ranked 11th last year by the players. I do think that if anyone paid attention, which maybe they didn't, maybe he'll just be called because of his name still. He probably should be coming off the board relatively soon, like somewhere in the 80s or so. And I think Cam is a weird situation because it's just like, if it's possible for it to be fatigue on a top 100 list, I think Cam would be reaching that point at this point.
Yeah.
Because he's been so consistently on them for a while now. But I forget where he landed last year. I want to say it was 42. Yeah, it was 42, I think.
Okay.
Or no, sorry, 42 was a couple years ago. He was ranked 83rd last year.
Yeah, that's right. Because freaking Patrick Queen was higher than Cam last year.
That tells you all you need to know about
that tells you something about the list right there.
Which reminds me, maybe Patrick Queen also will still be on this list somehow. But
it's possible.
I think that Cam, here's his name called again soon, because I think, coming off a strong season, like, he'll still be in that category. Outside of those two, though, I fear that someone's going to put Aaron in the top 100. Like, I do think that Rodgers has to be on this, especially because Bryce Young just got put on this list.
Yeah.
Like, no offense to Bryce Young, but like, again, I wonder if they're going to have enough people put Aaron on the list since he played last year and was better than he was with the Jets, theoretically, at least from a number standpoint. Outside of those three, I mean,
Is there a chance? Let me ask you
Frazier could
this:
break the list maybe this year because he's
Who's that? Say that again.
Zach Frazier.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe.
deservingly so.
Yeah,
Is he
but only a
popular
couple
enough with
centers
the
are going to
player?
be on the list,
Yeah,
though. I don't
yeah,
know if more than 3 would be, so maybe he won't be. Because I think Humphrey, Brewer, and Linderbaum will probably almost certainly make
yeah.
the list. I don't know if anyone past those 3 will, though. Um, yeah, I mean, those are the
I've
those
got
are
a
the
I got a
here.
surprised, a high profile name, but one that's not deserving of this list who could show up.
Okay.
Could we see Jalen Ramsey on here somewhere just because of the face value, name, reputation? Like that seems to be like how this list is made up sometimes.
We could. We definitely could. Where did he made the list last year, right?
I can't remember where
Let
he
me
was. I should have
actually
had that pulled up.
I wanted to double check. So he was 66 last year.
Yeah,
So maybe he falls off the list
maybe
because he did kind
Probably
of
should.
just not do a whole lot.
Yeah,
But again, he's definitely a name to watch, like just to make it at the back end. Again, Queen also made this list last year, which is reprehensible. Is the best word I can use for it. No offense, Patrick Queen. But yeah, outside of them, I don't know if anyone has a real shot to make it. I think just to throw
Yeah.
out, like, I think Joey deserves to be on the list this year.
Yeah.
If we're just going off of last year, right?
Yeah, the 2025 performance was great.
Yeah,
sure.
I think Joey deserves to be on the list. I already talked about Frazier. I mean, I'm not ready to go there quite yet, but like I'd be thinking about Trevatanu as well because I think he was awesome. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. All right, Shayne, I'm gonna say that there's 3. I think it's TJ Watt, I think it's Cam Hayward, and I think it's Aaron Rodgers.
I agree. Yeah.
So and I'll give you my ballpark range. Let me start in ascending order of the players I just listed. Aaron Rodgers, I think, is going to come off the list in the 80s. Let's say. We'll say Cam Hayward goes off the list in the 60s. I think he's lower because he didn't have a great statistically productive season, even though he was still Cam Hayward. And I think that TJ Watt is still a top 25 player voted on by the NFL. I did see a couple of those ballots. Like I saw a couple of screenshots of the ballot.
Yeah.
I believe if I'm not mistaken, somebody had TJ Watt listed as their 8th overall NFL player. Which again, I love you, TJ Watt.
But I love TJ. We
not
can't
that
be
good
doing
anymore. You're
point.
not that good. So
yeah, we can't be doing this at this point if we're trying to be serious. So I agree with you. I think those are the 3 names that I feel good about. Again, maybe Ramsey makes this list again just because I don't know. But I think I agree. I think Aaron's the first guy off the list if he makes it. I think he could be in the next couple batches, honestly. But I would say in the 80s as well. I think Cam is probably in the 70s, in my opinion. I think that, he had a really strong season, but some other guys have started to kind of creep up in the defensive tackle rankings and production wise. Like I think he could maybe just kind of get not forgotten about entirely, but just knock down a couple pegs. And then just for my own sanity, and also because I think that it'd be like unfair to rank him this high at this point in his career, I'll say TJ gets into like the 40s. Like they're like, well, he didn't have a ton of numbers last year, but it's still TJ Watt.
Yeah,
just throw him in the 40s, like overall. Like enough people have him high to get him up there. But
now, Shayne, one more question is I want to spin this the other way now since we're on the topic. Who actually legitimately, when you look at 31 other NFL teams and how rich the talent is and how many superstars are out there in the league, how many actual Pittsburgh Steelers players deserve to be talked about currently among the top 100 players in the NFL? Are there any?
Cam still for sure. Until proven otherwise. I do think Zach Frazier deserves to be in that conversation. I just think centers don't get enough credit to get on the list usually. Joey, based off of last year. And then, I mean, I'd still throw TJ in the back end of this list, probably just because of the run defense and the fact he still is a productive player. But honestly, like if you're going to consider, if you put TJ on the list, you probably need to also consider Herbig and Highsmith then too. All 3 of them at this point, because I think they're all like, if you factor in everything that they do, like they're all comparable at this point. But I don't think any of them would be in that list. Again, Herbig would just have to play more to get into the list. Unfortunately, it just comes as much as we like him, he has to play more snaps to, I think, be considered for a list like this. Outside of those guys, again, like I'm a big fan of Troy, so like I'd consider him, but I think he still needs to do it again, before we really get to that point. That's probably it.
Shayne, here's what I'm going to give you. I'm going to say 1.
Okay.
I think it's Cam Hayward, obviously.
Yeah,
He's
the
on
obvious
this
one.
list. He's still a top 4 or 5 defense tackle in the league, even with, I mean, just everything, like lack of maybe speed and quickness at this stage of his career, just as strong as an ox, and is still really good. I think when you do the math, you have 32 teams. Let's say if each team had 3 players on average, that's 96 players already. Yep. Some teams have well over 3. Like you look at the Rams, and it's like you've got Stafford and Puka Nacua and maybe Devontae Adams on there and Myles Garrett, and then there's other teams like the Texans. Yeah, it's like you've got both of your edge rushers and both of your cornerbacks and Jalen Petrie, and like there are teams that have 4, 5, 6 players. Mm-hmm. And so when you really look at like the legitimate Pro Bowl, all pro talent around the league, I don't know. I think that there's maybe just one. And I think though that what I would say on the positive side of things, there's a cluster of Steelers maybe just outside of that list that is deserving to be there. And I think will be there by next year. Like I think Nick Herbig could crack the list. I think Porter could crack the list. I think a lot of their young up and coming talent, Fautanu, Zach Frazier, Mason McCormick is you don't know. Like they've got some good youth on their team, but these guys have not quite hit that level where it's going to be like, I can cement you in as a top 100 player. I think to me, if I'm being as objective as possible, maybe it's just Cam right now. And I don't know. Because again, like the 3 edge rushers, how do you differentiate between Watt, Highsmith, and Herbig right now? Like I just don't even know how to order those 3 right now.
I don't know either. That's the thing. That's why I kind of said, like, if you consider TJ, you kind of have to consider the other 2. I think the other thing, and I get where you're coming from, I think if we're just going off of 2025, which is what this list is supposed to be, that's why I threw Joey in, because I do think he
that's fair.
One of the top corners last year.
Yep.
Especially because some guys had down years, and it's just kind of the nature of the position. The thing I will say is, as much as there are teams that have 5, 6 or more players who deserve to be on this list, there's some teams that also have maybe none. Like,
so there are teams
that's the balance a little bit.
None.
Like granted, even a team like the Dolphins, I think that like Aaron Brewer deserves to be on the list, and I also think that Jordan Brooks deserves to be on the list, probably too. Those 2, because he was an All-Pro. But I think like the Cardinals right now,
would be one, I would say.
Trey McBride, is that the only one?
McBride, I mean,
McBride would be the only one though?
He's going to be on. He's 100 catch, 1,200 yard tight end. He's going to be on this.
Is that the only one though?
It's the only one guy. The Browns, like Carson Schweizinger, like there are
the Garrison on the team. Yeah.
Is there a team with legitimately 0? I'm trying to think. Like Titans? Nope, they got Jefferson.
No, Jefferson Simmons. Yeah.
So,
Well, actually, okay. There is a team I can think of.
Okay.
Because of the fact that they traded these 2 players away mid-season, the Jets probably don't have one.
Yeah, the Jets have a ton of youth, just made a ton of draft picks.
Because Quinnen Williams.
Yes, Quinnen for sure would have been a lock.
Yeah, they were both traded.
Yeah.
If they were on the team at the end of the season,
I think you're probably right. And I think it's way too big.
Garrett Wilson probably doesn't get the respect.
Garrett Wilson, I don't think makes it.
He was banged up too.
I mean, they've got guys who will make it, like Armand Membu, I believe, but not at this stage. I don't think.
Yeah. So. You could argue for Breece Hall, I guess.
Yeah.
Because but running backs it's tough because I don't know how many they put on.
You might be right there. Yeah.
But that might be the team.
It would be if we just had like hours to spare on this podcast, we would just go down through every team.
How many teams? Yeah.
Yeah. See which ones are actually, we'll make our own top 100 list. There we go.
That would be an episode.
All right. Anything else, Shayne, that you want to get to before we?
No, I think we've talked plenty about the top 100 list. We'll have to talk more about it at some point when Steelers start coming off the board. But
we will. For sure.
It's certainly one of the lists of all time. I used to like it when I was 15.
Yeah.
And then I started.
15? How long has this list been around? I don't think it was around when I was 15.
I think it was. Was it 2012 or something like that? Was the first one?
Okay.
It would have been when I was 15, roughly. I think it was around that time. Point is, it's something that was fun until you realize, like, oh, they don't know what's going on.
Yeah, see, that's one of the joys of being able to do this job full time. Yeah. It's enjoyable. So let us know what you guys think. Did you like the show today? Leave us a comment, like the stream, subscribe to the podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Please leave us a written review. A 5-star review would be wonderful. On Apple Podcasts, We appreciate you joining us on the show today. This show goes live every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. You can also check out Shayne and Josh Orris' show. They go live on Mondays at 1:30. Thank you for joining us on the show today. You can follow Shayne on X at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on X at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Still Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also, check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Still Curtain podcast. And thanks again for listening to the Still Curtain podcast.